Thank you all for joining us for this webinar, What's All the Hub-Bub About Silicone Edge Graphics, SEG. Today we're going to address several questions. First, what is SEG? Second, what was the classic and Optima road to SEG? And finally, what are some design trends and reasons for using SEG? It's certainly our hope that you'll all have a clearer understanding of SEG overall, its benefits, capabilities, and installation. I'm Kevin Carty, the Vice President of Classic Exhibits, and I'll be your host. Please note that your microphones are muted in order to minimize the ambient noise, but we do want your questions. You can submit them during the session in the question panel. We'll answer them at the end and then turn on your microphones for additional questions. On behalf of the entire Classic Exhibits team, thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the webinar. All right, let's get started. So we have some guests today from Optima, Shantae and Tim Bonesteel. I want to thank them both for participating. I thought a unique way of maybe starting this off was to, since you don't see us all, but I didn't have pictures of the two of them, to come up with a unique, maybe corny way of introducing them. So I found a pretty cool generator online that allows you to type a person's name in and find out what either TV and or cartoon character they are. I have to admit it kind of came up embarrassing for some of us more than others, but first I'll introduce Shantae, who apparently is Bubbles from the Powderpuff Girls. Tim Bonesteel.
You chose that one on purpose.
Explains it for himself, and most embarrassingly, and I promise you this is actually accurate, what came up? Butthead.
No surprise.
So let's get to the serious business. What is SEG? Silicone Edge Graphics is a high-resolution dye-sublimated fabric graphic finished with a thin silicone strip, welt, or gasket. The silicone strip is sewn directly to the edge of the graphic, and the strip is then inserted into a frame with a recessed groove. The size of the graphic must be precise so that the fabric is taut when installed on the frame. The result is a large format graphic that mimics the old-fashioned hard panel graphics commonly found on custom displays and or interior spaces. So why SEG? Classic has a significant road to SEG, actually. Prior to 2004, and really in early 2004, all the way to 2008, we've primarily relied on Velcro attached solutions. Many of you are familiar with those, our early visionary design hybrids, Perfect 10, Magellan, some of our custom inline hybrids, the iconic iPhone booth, as well as many of our islands, all used Velcro attached graphics, where we either sewed the Velcro to the front of the graphic or the back of the graphic, dependent on whether or not you wanted the metal to be exposed. In 2008, Reed, myself, and Mel attended Euroshop together, and it really had a great influence on not just us, but really on our industry as a whole. There was lots of big fabric, but there was a need for more metal. People didn't want the metal to necessarily go away. What they wanted was to keep the structure there because of its lightweight nature, reconfigurability, etc., but maybe not see as much of the metal. So we met with our partner in Germany, Modul International, and they showed us some early samples of what we now know as our TSP profiles. We studied those and worked with them on the development moving forward of how we could come up with a well thought out group of TSP profiles. Rather than just having one or two, we wanted to create a full product line. If you haven't seen lately on the Classic Modul website, the amount of options for TSP profiles is actually quite large and quite diverse. Everything from inserts that you can use, you'll see later, that you can use to dress up existing booths, small framework for doing wall hanging units or small inlines, as well as larger profiles that accept SEG graphics front and back for doing light boxes, freestanding units, or even large, 10, 20-foot long walls that can be 12, 16 foot tall, much like you've seen in some large custom booths. That led us to develop the Segway line of hybrids. Segway hybrids are anything from tabletops to islands and pretty much everything in between. If you look at the top right photo as these are coming up, those are just wall hangings actually in our Exhibits Northwest office in Southwest Portland. You see my cursor. These are prints that Optima did, and just simple, instead of hanging art on the walls, we actually have hung SEG graphics. 10 by 20 exhibits like I'm showing here, tabletops below, large islands that you see both here. SEG is a great replacement for what traditionally was a much larger, heavier graphic. 10 by 10 freestanding kiosks, which can be lit, like you see over here on this inline, or not backlit, just freestanding kiosks, as you see here. So that's how Classic has really come to utilize SEG to this point, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I want to give an opportunity to Shantae and to Tim Bonesteel to talk a little bit more about how Optima has come to use SEG. So Tim, just prompt me when you want me to change slides, but the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. So for everybody who does not know me, this is Tim Bonesteel from Optima Graphics. And similar to Classic's road to SEG, or Silicone Edge Graphics, our path also started at Euroshop in 2008 with Dave Brown, our Vice President of Sales, and Jim Hoffman, our CEO, attending, and seeing the new European design influence. And similar to other Euroshops, Europe kind of leads the way for the trade show industry, and seeing how prevalent that graphic system was at Euroshop, Dave and Jim quickly realized that the need was going to arise for someone to be able to produce graphics for those type of systems. The SEG system is a wonderful progression or an evolution to a clean fabric look on metal. Going from Velcro to doing the traditional beading, using the screen rollers to install the graphics, and then doing the SEG, where you're able to now minimalize the frame look and maximize your graphic look. And for a company like ours, where we are very graphic focused and obsessed, that is a perfect design that we love to promote. We went so far as to actually dedicate an initial one staff member, Mary Mueller, and then a group of folks to just learn the ins and outs of the various SEG systems from the different manufacturers out there. Octanorm, Agam, Module, and Duo primarily are the ones that we interact with the most. But it was basically to learn a bunch of tips and tricks and find some of the universal things that tie those systems together in order to make as close to perfect graphics every single time that we do. Kevin, if you want to go to the next slide. So as time has gone on, we've discovered some keys to success. Like everything, these are basically tips and tricks in order to maximize the look of your graphic and the ability to get a great fitting graphic. The first thing that came up is for us to make sure that we're getting the right measurements. Silicone Edge Graphics are a nice system because we do not necessarily have to have the frame here in order to do new skins. We have a much higher percentage chance of getting great drum skin type skins onto pre-existing frames without us seeing the frame if we've got a couple of simple measurements. Now, if we do have the frame here, that's even better because we can print to fit and make sure that you're getting just this lovely graphic. But even without the frame, compared to something like a pillowcase graphic system, not having the frame here, we have a much higher percentage chance of getting this great looking graphic. But it does come down and starts with the measurement. So after a time of me failing to basically accurately describe what we need, I put this little picture together Originally, I was telling folks we need you to give us the width and the height from the outside edge of the graphic channel to the outside edge of the graphic channel. And that's a whole lot of words and a lot of repeated words. So this picture does a much better job of illustrating what we're looking at. So if you look at the yes, we've got the tape measure all the way to the outside edge from the channel that will actually hold the silicone that your graphic will be attached to. So if you give us the outside edge to the outside edge of that channel for your width and your height, rather than doing the inside edge, where you can see listed under the no, do not do that, it gives us that is the measurement that we need. If we have that measurement plus know which system you're using, so that way we know which type of silicone to sew in there, we can give you this wonderful drum skin type graphic. So that's the first key to success and finding out what graphic size you actually have. Kevin, if you want to go to the next slide. The next thing is choosing what type of fabric is going to work best for you for your particular application. There's 4 main fabrics that we recommend that have various uses. Polyknit 9, the workhorse of fabrics, we use that in a wide variety of, from banner stands to fabric mural systems here. But Polyknit 9 has the wonderful ability to work with a lot of different systems, and SEG systems are one of them as well. It is a very basic system. Another basic fabric that we can use is what we call our Brilliance fabric. Also does a great job. It's a little bit more opaque than Polyknit 9, although Shantae says that the difference is rather minimal between the two. Now, if you are looking for something that wants to be backlit, now we're getting into some specialty needs. And that's where we might consider the Trifab fabric. Trifab is designed for backlit applications. It gets its name because it's 3 pieces of fabric that are bonded together. So the print, when it happens, is on the top layer of fabric, and the back 2 layers act as natural diffusers. So you get this nice even glow. It is definitely more opaque than Polyknit 9 and Brilliance. However, it is more susceptible to wrinkling and hard creases. Rather than just have 1 piece of fabric there, you now have 3 pieces of fabric. So if you fold it and put a hard crease in it, you are definitely going to want to get that steamer out there to help expedite that crease removal. If you were just to hang Trifab onto the frame, you might not fully pull out that crease, even if you left the graphic up there for a significant time. The similar to Trifab is our most opaque fabric option, which is a fabric called Facade. It, rather than being 3 layers of white fabric like the Trifab is, it is actually a white, black, white. So in essence, it has its own light blocker built into the fabric. Because it also is using those 3 layers of fabric, it is, again, more susceptible to wrinkling and hard creases. With both Facade and Trifab, the way that I recommend to folks in terms of shipping their graphics, if it's small enough, we can definitely wrap it on a tube. However, again, if you have a very big graphic, that might not be that economical. So if you are going to fold Trifab or Facade, the way to think of it is fold the graphic as if it were a towel and not a paper airplane. Now, Facade, the one drawback to Facade, it is less white of a fabric than the previous 3 options. The main reason is because it has that center black layer. It tinges the outside white fabrics and makes them look a little gray. However, you do get something that is definitely more opaque. If you compare the 2 pictures that I have there, the top picture is actually showing a SEG system using the Polyknit 9. The picture down below is actually showing some cubicles that we had actually made here at Optima Graphics using the Facade. The Polyknit 9, you can clearly see the outline of the frame system through the fabric. The fabric is just stretched so tight across that frame that any small amount of backlighting, you're going to be able to see that perimeter shadow. The Facade is extremely opaque, and you will not see that framework poking through. So there are some different things to consider when you're picking your fabric. For most purposes, if you were to talk to Shantae and say, I don't know what fabric that I want to use, we're probably going to go back and forth between Brilliance and Facade depending on how opaque you want the fabric to be. Again, some people don't like the facade because it is not a pure white fabric. I know personally when I've seen facade prints up next to polyknit and it's been the same artwork, I've been hard-pressed to distinguish the two, but I know that there are plenty of people out there who are pickier on color than I am, that just have a more finely tuned eye for it. So it is something to consider if there is a question ever. It's definitely something where we can do some proofs or send you some samples of the fabrics themselves so you can see what they look like. Kevin, if you want to head.
I'm going to interrupt for a second. One of the things I would point out, Tim, is I do agree that side by side, color-wise, I'm like you. I don't necessarily see a big difference. Where there is a standout difference that we've experienced is when you've got, especially close-ups that involve the human face or skin, the arms, the legs. The facade really absorbs the ink well, and humans show up really, really well in facade.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I would definitely agree. Shantae, would you agree on that one?
Yeah, it definitely has a great saturation level.
So let's talk about preparing your file. So the easiest thing, and really this is no matter what SEG system you are using, if you prepare your live area and then include a 1-inch bleed around the perimeter, that will give us enough fabric to work with in order to fit your fabric and apply the silicone to get it to fit into the system perfectly. This one's pretty simple, but the question does come up consistently. So, again, trying to keep things simple for you guys. If you prepare your live area and then add the 1-inch bleed around the outside edge, that will work perfectly for us. So if we want to head off to the next one, so let's talk about installation. There's 3 easy steps to help with your SEG graphic installation. And again, this is really no matter what system you're using, these general principles will apply. However, there might be some caveats here and there. So the first thing is whenever you're using SEG, you always want to put your 4 corners in first. Before touching, in between, secure those 4 corners. After that, you want to push in the middle part of the fabric, and then you're going to work your way to the edge. Now, Shantae pointed out to me yesterday, so I'll interrupt myself before she has to. If you have a very long or tall graphic, rather than just doing the middle and then working your way to the outside edges, what you might want to consider to make things easier is push in the middle of your fabric into the channel, and then go to the quarters, now in between the middle and your corner, push in that middle, just to minimize the space that you're having to push in. It'll make installing the rest of the graphic easier and have it hang straighter. Now, the biggest tip that I can tell you, and this last one, is what leads to the majority of the problems that we hear about for SEG graphics, is how to actually put the silicone in. You want to push your silicone in and not slide your finger down the silicone like it was a Ziploc bag. The reason that is important is the silicone, similar to the fabric, does have some stretch built in. So to give you the most extreme example of what could go wrong, if you started your graphic at one corner and then basically slid your finger around that side and worked your way around the frame, sliding the silicone and the graphic in, when you get back to that corner that you started and you're now going to end at, it could potentially appear as if you've got 2 inches, depending on the size of your frame, of extra fabric and silicone hanging there. That's why the pushing in straight is very important. And that also is why you want to do your 4 corners and then push in your middles and then work your way to the outside edges. Shantae, do you have anything you'd like to add on the installation?
Nope, I think you got it covered.
All righty. Well, wonderful.
Tim, I was going to ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Is it, I think I know the answer, but pretty much the same mode, if you will, to addressing curves Or is there anything else is there anything else we should be concerned with or considering if it's whether it's convex or concave curve, or just treat it like it's flat as well and approach it the same way?
Treating it like it's flat and approaching it the same way is the way to go. Yeah, the 3 steps that you see there are universal, whether you're dealing with a flat wall, whether you're dealing with a curved wall, or whether you're dealing with a structure where you're actually wrapping the graphic around a conference room, for instance. The starting with your corner. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to add on, if you're doing something 3-dimensional, like where you're going around a corner, instead of just doing 4 corners per side, you'll actually start with all of your corners. So do all of your corners. So you might have 6 corners, and you'll start with those 6 corners, and then go to your centers like we had described previously.
In essence, you're just leaving your slack you're making sure that you leave your slack in the middle, because at the end it'll all tighten up if you keep your corners true.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's it for the installation.
Fantastic. Did you have a question? No? Okay. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about some design trends using SEG graphics. The first of which is being able to modify existing designs or existing properties that are out there. I'm going to highlight 3 of the profiles that I showed you before. One of which is on a lot of islands that we've built in the past, we're using the larger Q914, which is the 91 millimeter square profile, as the structural upright profile, and even as some of the cross members. There's TSP profiles that can actually be applied right on site, and there's no drilling that needs to happen, but they actually just apply to the face of the profile and allow you to then turn what was maybe even a trapped graphic, 4x8 trapped graphic, or some other graphics mechanism, be able to replace that with an SEG graphic, as you see here. The next one is really related as one of the options for inlines, which is you can attach to the top of an existing cross member, which typically is a Z45 or a Z33 in most of our inlines, and then create, sorry for the blurry image, but then create a front facade, if you will, to an existing inline booth, all out of SEG graphics. The third modification is a smaller insert called TSP3, which can be, again, put into larger profiles or even added to some of the thinner profiles and allow you to then create in your 10x10s or even in your islands, if you want the structure still to be seen, but you still would like to tap into the technology of SEG, you can do it this way. If you look at this particular booth, you've got a pillowcase obviously on top. That's a Velcro graphic for the header, but the 3 back wall graphics are all done via SEG utilizing that TSP3 insert. And that can be done on larger exhibits as well. The next trend really relates to bending. We've really hung our hat on bending, to be quite honest. We're still, at this point, the only manufacturer that is doing full CNC bending of all of our profiles. As many of you have probably heard myself or Mel or Reed speak about in the past, the difference between CNC bending and manual bending is really just in how precise it is, and it's repeatable. And if parts get lost, we can replicate them and send you those parts back, and they will always fit. We've really moved that into. One moment. Move that into our TSP profiles as well. So any of our 45 millimeter.
Hello?
Oh, I think we lost Kevin there.
Are you there?
There you are.
So some samples of the bending back to this booth that we showed before. This is a 10x20 back wall where we have ultimately bent the TSP profile, and this just shows a close-up of that profile. It's actually our TSP48, which is a double-sided SEG profile. Probably the best example was our own booth this year at Exhibitor. If you look across the top here, and this was quite a statement at the show and received very well, all of these are different bends of our classic module TSP profiles, and this is all large SEG fabric graphics. Not only there, but what you're not seeing is down here, one of the 10 by 10 vignettes actually had bent SEG graphics as well. Bending is a huge thing for us. It really makes a difference in your ability to design with Silicone Edge Graphics.
Kevin, if I can jump in real quick on the bending and amend an earlier statement. When we have done SEG graphics for bent frames, that is one of those instances where we would definitely prefer and recommend having the frame here in order to fit that curve. What makes SEG relatively easy to produce graphics for without having the frame is, in the past, or traditionally when it started, it was squares and rectangles, and we understood how our fabric was going to react and interact with squares and rectangles. When you start including curves, it does add that extra element or extra dimension, not to be punny. So having the frame here in order to print to fit is definitely the recommended way.
Totally agree. As the bending has come along and has been integrated into more and more of our standard kits, and as that continues, like we have with several of our other 10 by 10, 10 by 20 kits in particular, and some of our freestanding pieces, we'll have bent components on site as test frames at Optima, so that you don't have to worry about the additional shipping costs of always having to ship a frame, especially on some of the simpler kits. So we've done it on a few already. Some of you have already experienced that or ordered those. But as this continues to develop, we will put more test frames in place. Probably the coolest example, if you ask me, was the Stratocaster that we did for EDPA last year. Not only is that bent SEG, bent TSP profiles with an SEG graphic, but we also did the whole thing out of Trifab, and that is Backlit. The next design trend is really just highlighting some other applications that are available out there. As I explained earlier in the Exhibits Northwest showroom, where we had some artwork up on the walls, this is an example of a client use where it's actually bent TSP profiles with an SEG. We are seeing more and more of this from corporate use, interior use. So I hope in the future to have even more examples to send out via newsletters and whatnot to help hopefully spark sales for you all in this area as well. Obviously, the simple 10 by 10. This is a Segway Sunrise, and you can see it's got the knob technology on the back, so toolless, but also utilizing the SEG graphics on the front with the TSP profile. Integrating it into custom designs. This is a full-blown custom inline for a 10 by 30 booth. And one of the most beautiful, quite honestly, this picture doesn't do it the justice it deserves, one of the most beautiful backlit SEGs we've seen come through here ever was this shot of the countryside in South America for Mercanta. And this was just built right into this custom build. Some unique applications where we're utilizing multiple frames of TSP profiles and SEG graphics and connecting them all together into one unique back wall. And then also utilizing TSP profiles and SEG graphics in combination with pillowcase graphic, which the center is pillowcase and the top and bottom. It gives a nice, a little bit different, unique layered look. We have done some overhead signs out of the SEG TSP profiles as well. Not a lot, but we have done them when it's called for really unique applications, sometimes for internal lit, we can do that as well. I will warn you on this, as I believe Optima can attest to, Shantae in particular, is whenever you get into some of these more customized overhead structures that are utilizing these profiles as opposed to the traditional aero or aviator profiles, there are some show halls that are going to require some engineering information before they will hang it. Also retail. This is a Nike storefront. We do a fair amount of retail work through a local distributor here and some other distributors on the East Coast for a few national brands. But this is an SEG graphic in the front, backlit, and this was in the storefronts during March Madness. This was in the storefronts of all the Nike stores across the United States. As you can see, this is all actually classic module extrusion as well, showing the bracket of 32 teams for March Madness. So when and why should you and your customers consider SEG? Island exhibits, when replacing the traditional large wood structure sections with lightweight aesthetic options. Smaller inlines when message is everything. Even in the smaller booths when replacing pop-up displays. More design bang for your buck. Idiot-proof, when everything is done correctly at the front end, the install on the show floor is flawless. Structural anonymity, when the client doesn't want the structure to be the story. We see this a lot, even on inlines, smaller inlines, but certainly on islands where, again, to emphasize, they want the structure, but they don't necessarily want to see as much of it as they did in the past. The repurposing of an existing display, a little hardware addition can go a long way. We highlighted some of that, where you can spend a little money on an existing design, or as you're maybe growing in an existing booth, convert that booth into accepting SEG graphics. What I'd like to refer to as the biggest loser factor, and especially North American shows, really matters. SEG fabric does fold down small, weighs less, and is more durable than the traditional 4x8 direct prints. And they look just as good in the end. And then the final presentation. In most cases, it's cleaner, it's less cluttered. How many times have we heard, I want an airy, open display that shouts my brand from across the show floor? And large stitch and fabric graphics certainly show that. Hopefully some takeaways from today are, measurement is critical. If done right, should be successful every time. There's many bendable solutions out there from classic exhibits. Curves clearly rule, and they are probably the most prominent the most prominent trend that we are seeing currently. Please continue to push us in that direction. If you're not seeing something through Design Monday or through P5D, or you have an idea of wanting to do something, don't be afraid to send it our way. We'll certainly put it through all the tests and try to come up with a way to do it. Cost is not always a factor. SEG is often very cost effective, like in the Segway Sunrise. More expensive in large islands, but still not compared to the expense of many custom designs. In the end, it all depends on the overall graphic scheme and how many graphics are involved. And lastly, it's not just a solution for traditional trade show applications. You can use it in retail, museums, architectural, business offices, rodeos, strip clubs, rocket construction, and amusement park rides. We've seen it all. With that, I appreciate your time, but I wanted to open this up to any questions that anybody might have. Mel's actually manning the question side of things, so I don't know if anybody's submitted any, but we want to address the ones that people have submitted during the presentation first before we open up the mics.
We have a question from Chris, and this is probably more for Tim and for Shantae. When you guys were talking about installation, she asked about the installation on a circle. How do you install SEG on a circle?
Shantae, do you have any direct experience with this? Because I have not been involved with a perfect circle install.
No, I haven't either, but I would recommend going like installing at the top and then going straight down to the bottom, like install opposite corners, not corners, but like install the top, then install the bottom, then install the left, and then install the right, and then work in between where you've installed that.
So
think of Chris, we've done this on our, we have some samples that we utilize for classic module, and just think of it as a compass and do north, south, east, west, and then you know, join everything after that.
Yep.
Another question is, why does it matter which extrusion system is used as you guys are manufacturing the SEG graphic?
I think the question being, what's the difference between applying SEG to classic module or to AGAM or to Octanorm? Why does that matter?
Basically, as is the case with the trade show industry, we as a group seem to try to make things as complicated as possible. So all of these different systems use a different sized silicone and a different sized channel that silicone fits into. So knowing which system you're using is important so we know how to finish it correctly so that the graphic will stay in that groove. And the differences between are actually fairly significant. So yeah, that is why it's important.
So the SEG graphics are not interchangeable from one system to another?
That is correct.
Depending upon the system, there are 3 to 4 main types of silicone that we stock, and several systems use the same. Like the one that we use for module will work in other systems, but not all of them universally.
I'll confirm on one. Classic module as well as the AGAM profiles traditionally are fairly interchangeable. So within SEG, we have seen the same. So the other brands I can't really speak to.
Right.
If anyone else has any questions, on your control panel, there's the ability to raise your hand. If you want to raise your hand, I'll be happy to unmute your microphone, and you can ask that question. All right. This is Jim. I have unmuted your microphone. What's your question? Jim Monroe? Jim, for whatever reason, we are not hearing you on it. Can you type your question instead? Anybody else have a question? And okay, here is a question. What's the timeline for production, Jim asks, on SEG compared to other fabric graphics?
From the graphic side, it's no different than standard Optima turnarounds. We typically call out, depending upon the size of the job, from a graphic standpoint, we would like 3 to 4 business days for your basic stuff. If you're asking us to wrap an entire 20 by 20 booth with graphics, with SEG graphics, it would obviously be a little bit longer, but from the graphic standpoint, it doesn't take us any extra time to do that than any of our other products.
And if we're managing the project as a whole from the classic end of things, it's really no different than a 20 by 20 with SEG versus a 20 by 20 with Velcro applied graphics versus a 20 by 20 with large format direct print graphics. It's going to fall within the same classic exhibits timeline. We just may handle the ordering of the graphics a little bit differently but you don't see that. We handle that, so you wouldn't necessarily see or feel any difference.
All right. I have a question from Ingrid. She said, are there videos or YouTube videos that show the setup? And I'm sure, too, she said the setup both for generally SEG, and also she asked about the setup for the Segway Sunrise and how much time did that take. So if you guys can answer the video portion on SEG in general, Kevin and I will answer the question on the Segway Sunrise.
Well, I know on the Optima Graphics, the Optima Graphics YouTube channel, Derek Leffridge in our marketing department was nice enough to put a general SEG graphic installation video together that goes over the points that I had made on the slide. So yes, we do have that available for the graphic installation video.
And then on the classic side, if on Exhibit Design Search, if you're in the SEG or the Segue portion of Exhibit Design Search, you will notice that there are links to setup videos for really Segue as well as many of our other product lines on our YouTube channel. You can watch them either right in Exhibit Design Search or link to our YouTube channel, and there are setups for everything from tabletops to very complex and or easy inline exhibits that use both Velcro graphics and or SEG graphics. So yes is the answer.
There's a question from Chuck. Chuck says, when doing backlit, frontlit, or any other is there any other change in file prep to achieve the optimum color with the fabric when doing backlit or frontlit of some kind?
In terms of, I'm thinking
file
the
prep.
question
So
is,
if it's
does the file need to be prepared differently?
Backlit versus frontlit. Does the file need to be prepared differently?
And as far as I understand, Shantae, and correct me if I'm wrong, no.
Correct.
For us, it comes down to just knowing which fabric, but there's nothing that you need to do on your end to prepare your file differently, whether it will be frontlit or backlit.
Right. Yep.
All right. Jim asks, does temperature or humidity impact the performance of any of those fabrics?
Does what? I'm sorry?
Does temperature or humidity affect the performance of any of those fabrics?
I don't know that that's anything we've specifically tested, but no, not to my knowledge. Obviously, in the dye sublimation process, they're being exposed to extreme heat and stuff like that. So once it has shrunk in the dye sublimation process, it should not have any challenges after that.
Great.
Right. Chris asks, did I understand that the client can now add a piece to an existing system using like, for instance, Z45 on site, and they don't need to send the system back to Classic to have that done?
The answer, Chris, is yes. I'll throw a caveat on that by saying I'd like to see it. If it's I'll use an example. If they have a Sacagawea unit and they want to convert that to an SEG graphic, very simple. No need to send any hardware back to us. If they have even some island exhibits, really no need to necessarily send anything back to us. They can just apply it there with some simple directions. Some complex projects may require that. If there's bent pieces especially, and I would encourage that maybe we get those back. We have the CNC files here, but I would say on bent projects we may want to ask for a few pieces. But I guess the important part of that is we're only asking for, we would only be asking for certain pieces. We don't need the whole exhibit sent back. But certainly on anything flat, I can't right now think of any reason why you would need to send anything back.
And the way that typically works, Chris, just so you know, if you go into a Classic Module site, there's an extrusion under the tissue fabric section called TSP3, and TSP3 has a what do we call it? What is that portion that? It basically slides into the existing groove.
Yeah, it slides right into the groove, so it can slide in or slide out. Some of the ones that apply to the face, though, they actually have a set screw that holds them into place.
Yeah, so that's why it depends on it. I'm gonna elaborate if I can just for a second, where Shantae and Tim talked about installation a little bit, and I'll describe what I tell people about the installation of SEG graphics. And that installation is, and I say everything that Tim and Shantae say about installation, but I also add this element, is the nature of Silicone Edge Graphics, as you put it in the groove, it wants to migrate. It wants to move with you in the direction that you're actually installing the graphic itself. So if you're installing it from top to bottom, it wants to move with you in that direction. which is largely the reason why you end up maybe having an inch or two at the bottom if you don't start in the corners. What my trick is I always attempt to install the SEG portion in the groove and then actually force it back into the corner. Not hard, but I'm forcing it, or at least preventing it from migrating in the direction that you're going. And if you do that, 99% of the time you will have no excess fabric at the end when you're doing it. However, if you allow it to migrate, and the best example of that is if you actually grab on a piece of SEG fabric that's in the channel and you pull on it, you'll see it will move 2 or 3 inches, and that's exactly what happens if you're not installing that and preventing it from actually traveling within that.
We have one more question.
How are lights attached to extrusion for backlit graphics, Velcro attachment clip that mounts to extrusions? Sarah, are there LED and fluorescent light options? Are there any other things we need to know for creating backlit extrusion system?
Sarah, to be frank, we could do a full webinar based on that alone. The answer is yes to all. There's fluorescent, there's LED options, there's paneled options that can go in place. There's acrylic options that we can do, custom acrylic that is edge-lit acrylic that goes in that lights up certain things. We've seen several different ways of doing it and have done different ways of doing it. Typically, for example, in retail applications, the lighting is much, much different. It's either really, really raw in some cases, or it's really high-end. For the typical trade show booth, if we can, we like to bury the lights. If it's fluorescent, we try to bury them into a larger extrusion, maybe cutting it out or using a half round and tucking the lighting on the interior of that opening so no one can see it, and then just flood a space with light that way. LED is clearly beginning to lead the way, though, and our production, on-the-floor production manager has really come up with some unique options there of taking LED tape and putting it into the interior channel of pretty much anything. And then dependent on what that light is and on how cool it is or how warm it is for the application, we may even put a diffuser piece over the channel that helps diffuse the light a little bit. So seriously, I could go on forever about there's so many different options. I'm happy to talk to anybody offline about that and about some options that we can do, but don't fear sending those questions or suggestions or even projects that might have a call for that, because there's a good chance that we've done it, especially in the last year with some of the different projects we've been working on.
Kevin, Shante, what are you seeing on your end as far as backlighting?
In terms of backlighting options, it really, that is kind of a big open world. Depending on the design of the structure, the space that's allowed, and the budget, there are a number of ways that you could go, from fluorescent tubes. We've done, I know, some T4 fluorescents for some backlighting options, and have explored doing some LED blankets, and a lot of it comes down to the budget of the specific project and the size of the structure itself. So yeah, there are a ton of options there, but there's definitely not a universal right or wrong way to do it that applies to every job. It is very job specific. Would you agree with that, Shante?
Absolutely. Yep.
One of the nice things I will throw out there about the combination of the TSP profiles and the Trifab SEG fabric is the way the Trifab works is great, because it covers a lot of bruises, if you will. You can put lighting in a lot of, the bigger the structure, you have to get a little more creative, but if you're within that 10-foot back, 10 size, you can do a lot on the inside of that without creating hot spots, we have found anyways, with most of the Trifab applications. So it allows you to use a lot of LED, which may not look real pretty when you pull the graphic off, but when the graphic goes on, just lights it amazingly. So Looks like there's no more questions other than that. I want to thank everybody for giving of your time today. I hope it's helpful. If you have any questions or you want to reach out to me directly, you certainly can. It's just kevin@classicexhibits.com. I want to thank Tim and Shantae for participating and for their help, and wish you all a great rest of your day. Thanks again.